Welcome, everyone. I am Erik Roth, shamanic astrologer of Inspiral Nexus, and today I'm here to talk about Jupiter, and more specifically, Jupiter's ingress or transit into the sign of Pisces. And this is a interesting time going into not only this year, but into 2022 as well, where Jupiter spends some time in that sign. And I'm going to share with everyone all the different points about this, what this means, and how we can even work with it on our own level here with humanity, with our own individual selves and our own spiritual path. So let's dive right into it, shall we? Okay, here we go. Jupiter in Pisces. It takes about 12 years for Jupiter to go through all the signs of the zodiac. And this year, it spent most of its time, at least in 2021 here, it spends most of its time in the sign of Aquarius. But there is this short period of time that's coming up here where, relatively speaking, where it spends in the sign of Pisces. So that is what we're going to be primarily focused upon in this video. And I'm going to share all the other facts about this and why it's called a year star, where that came from, what role it plays in our lives, and how we can utilize it and past transits that have occurred in the 20th century and before, as well as what's coming up here in the future when it comes again into in the 21st century, when it happens again after this 2021 to 2022 period. So here's the breakdown of what I just shared. These are the main factors to know about Jupiter, and in particular Jupiter and Pisces during this time. So let's go a little farther into this presentation here. So Jupiter, a little basic facts about Jupiter and why in shamanic astrology we also call it the year star. Well, this honors and goes back to thousands of years ago when Chinese astronomers looked at this when they really studied it and recorded it, they viewed it as the year star. And it was critical in creating a 12-year calendar based upon Jupiter's movement through their zodiac. They called it the Great Year Namer. I've got a reference here of an older publication that has a segment about the beginnings of Chinese astronomy that you all can also look at, the Journal of American Oriental Society, number 78, and shows the page numbers there. So this is where I found this, but it was taught through Daniel DeMario at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, but I wanted to look up where the source was, and I'm sure that there are other sources that go from this, but that was based on the research of Homer Dubs. Jupiter's orbit is 11.86 years, from a heliocentric perspective, meaning based on the sun. But from Earth, being on Earth, it comes back around to the same seasonal sign about every 11.95 years. So rounding up, that's about 12 years. So essentially a whole solar year, Jupiter spends in one sign. Now, after, 12 of those, there's some change left over to that. And so in some calendar years, Jupiter splits some time between two signs, such as in 2021 here, where Jupiter spends 2.5 months in Pisces and the rest of the year in Aquarius. And in 2022, it spends part of its time in Pisces and the other part of its time in the sign of Aries. So that's this 2-year period where Jupiter is in Pisces, but it's connected to these two other signs, like it retrogrades back to one sign or it goes forward into another sign. Jupiter's role in astrology, in shamanic astrology in particular, in ancient Western astrology, or traditional astrology really, Jupiter was affiliated with both Sagittarius and Pisces. It was connected to those when there was the establishment of the zodiacal signs in the modern way. in the late part of the first millennium BCE and the early part of the first century AD or CE. This was shamanic. Jupiter was connected to both Sagittarius and Pisces, and they had the sort of that resonance as the centuries went on. That resonance became more solidified. But then after Neptune was discovered and studied, and then eventually integrated into astrology, it was much more. Neptune began to be associated more with Pisces, and in shamanic astrology, Neptune has a greater resonance with Pisces, with Sagittarius with Jupiter. So in traditional astrology, they look at that as rulerships. We just use the word resonance for that description rather than sort of a hierarchical way of matching the planet and sign. But in the case of Jupiter, there is still a natural resonance or expression of Jupiter that Pisces connects to, especially when it comes to the path of spirituality. Pisces has a very deep-seated connection to spirit or spirituality, the mystical plane, the divine, so the celestial realm. And so this is what we are connected to with, if we're looking at Jupiter and Pisces, there's still many astrologers that connect Jupiter and Pisces together. And so, I look at this as seeing that there's still those threads of connection of Pisces and Jupiter. Jupiter in shamanic astrology has qualities of expansion, one's vision quest path of enlightenment. It's our experiential road, the journey that we learn most from readily about our life purpose. So it's the path that we go down, our experiential road. If we look at our astrology chart, if you will, as a roadmap to our life, but Jupiter plays the role of the road itself for the chart as a vessel, where the leading edge of that would be the ascendant, and the sun representing the fuel, and the moon representing lineage, sort of our origin point, our connection to our original identity. And of course, all the other planets play other roles as well. So Jupiter Pisces kind of gives us a preview of more opportunities for transpersonal and ecstatic states of being, but also perhaps a greater heart cognition of empathy and compassion. So I'm going to share more about Pisces here in just a moment, but I wanted to kind of clue people in onto this part. And I'll be sharing the dates of this, of the Jupiter and Pisces transit coming up here shortly as well. So what is Pisces? So these are the qualities of this archetype. It's highly empathic and compassionate, has a connection to the source, loves without bias, well suited to the healing arts, can merge completely with another, and spirit, creation of safe space, selfless service, and giver to others, the great dreamer, and the creator of ecstatic experiences. But on the other side of the same archetype, we have other extreme versions of this. They can be highly indecisive, without boundaries, that can lead in extreme cases to martyrdom, addiction to dreams or escapism, which can include any modalities or mediums that they might find themselves in, including alcohol and drugs and anything that takes them to the other realms or escapes from reality. Pisces can have a hard time with reality itself and be prone to connect, believing in things that don't, may not necessarily be, quote, true. So they're vulnerable in that way. They can be addicted to certain emotions, including grief and suffering. And they also can be overwhelmed by reality itself, which is why they can turn to that Pisces can turn to those things. But in the case of Pisces, it's learning to really create some form of boundary or balance and understand their own identity instead of absorbing everyone else's and not having their own. And that's sort of the danger around Pisces. But again, Pisces has this powerful a dreamer-like quality and connection to source and to be a healer in this world. And on a healthy level, it can really shine out there in the world. I look at certain figures, such as a Mother Teresa figure, and her ideal qualities can be like that kind of energy of Pisces. And those who heal without any bias or judgment toward family or caste or class or national boundary, like certain organizations that Pisces can thrive in, where they just there to really help and heal, and utilize their gifts, their qualities to help and be of service to others. So Jupiter Pisces here that we have here in this video, May 13th is when Jupiter ingresses into the sign of Pisces for the first time since 2010. It's the largest planet in the solar system, and it will be in the sign of Pisces for 2.5 months, and then it will retrograde back into Aquarius on July 28th. Jupiter Pisces gives us a preview of more opportunities, something I just previewing here when I shared about it a little bit in the previous slide. So this could be a time for all of us, and again, this is going to also take place in 2022 as well. But this could be time to uplift the heart a bit more, have more compassion, for us to connect a little deeper into, letting go of judgments, of biases. Jupiter can help us see beyond that, and help us see the sort of the heart spirit in all humanity, in all of us. But it can also lead, certainly there is the, one might say shadow side or the toxic side to a Jupiter and Pisces transit, which could lead to greater escapism or, things where they could be overwhelmed by reality and feel too much, and not wanting to be part of it, especially those that are more sensitive to the environment, those that are more sensitive to reality itself, to the third dimension. It could also lead to a time where it may be more challenging to, envision one's future, to have concrete goals or things where you're trying to, line things up resourcefully here in the middle world. But there are other factors. Jupiter in Pisces doesn't operate in a void. There's other planets doing other things that are contributing to this, but this could create a sort of a greater opening for that. And, Neptune is something I'll talk about a little bit. Neptune's still in Pisces right now, will be for several more years. And that's also adding to that stew, if you will. So where is Jupiter going to be in the sky on May 13th and also on December 28th, 2021? So those 2 points where Jupiter goes over, also at the end of the retrograde on July, at the end of July, it'll be there again. So it'll make 3 passes over that 0-degree mark. But this is where Jupiter is going to be here in the center of the screen. You can see Saturn still in the Goatfish constellation. And these two were deeply connected, very close conjunction at the right around the December solstice. And when they both entered Aquarius, right around the same time, within a few days of each other. And now Jupiter's gotten pretty far. Jupiter moves faster. It's closer in to the sun, so it definitely moves faster than Saturn in that way. On the Pacific coast, Jupiter of North America, Jupiter rises about 2:45 a.m. So for a while there, it wasn't visible because it was on the other side of the sun, but now it's becoming more and more visible. So for those that stay up really late, you'll be able to see it come up or get up before dawn and see it a little bit higher in the sky in the southern part of the sky, depending on where you live. And then by the summer and early fall, Jupiter is definitely going to be have a much greater visibility along with Saturn, and a bit brighter too. One of the interesting things about the boundary where Pisces is located, where Jupiter is located here. There's this line, it's a visible line of where the seasonal point of Pisces exists, right there in this water bearer constellation. You can see the outstretched arm of the water bear, which astronomers still call Aquarius, and the overlaying over the goatfish here. So they kind of occupy some of the same spatial area in the sky. But you can see the fish here, which has long been associated with the sign of Pisces and still called Pisces by astronomers, is way off onto the left side of the screen here. So it's going to be a while before Jupiter moves into there. In fact, not until next year, where Jupiter will be in there. And you can see the equinox point right over here on the left side of the screen, where the two lines merge, come together. That's the ecliptic and the equator, the galactic equator, or not the galactic equator, the projected Earth equator onto the sky. So this is what we have here. But another interesting fact is the star Fomalhaut, which I'm going to talk about here in a moment, in the southern fish. The water bear in the constellation, you could see this under dark skies. You can see the water bear, and you can see these like stars that represent little droplets that come down into the mouth of the southern fish, and also kind of form this watery area of the sky, including the fish. And there's a Cetus, the whale constellation, and part of course, the goatfish has that. So the waters, the cosmic waters of knowledge and wisdom, idealism, sort of progression into the breaking old traditions, new knowledge coming through. And Fomalhaut being right at the mouth, being the mouth of the fish and the one receiving those waters. So I'm going to talk about this in just a moment here. So Fomalhaut is also one of the four royal stars, the other royal stars being Regulus and Antares and Aldebaran, what at one time formed the four corners of the sky or four corners of the earth. These stars marked those positions, and they will again in the centuries to come. So this star represents mystical dreams, magic, poetry, higher ideals. It is vulnerable to the physical realm due to the overwhelming nature of reality. It has a lot of marks that are connected to Pisces, but those with Fomalhaut connected to personal planet point can thrive in spiritual and artistic arenas, especially if you have it. Fomalhaut exists at 4 degrees Pisces. Jupiter gets within 2 degrees of that star, longitudinally speaking, meaning the zodiacal degree. And so this, if you have it connected to some of your personal points, such as your moon, your ascendant, your natal Jupiter or sun, Venus and Mars, Mercury can also be important, or the midheaven. This means that star can be a personal star to you, especially if it's within 6 degrees of that personal point. This is something where Jupiter going into here can activate the star Fomalhaut in your life and in the collective, opening up the mystical and artistic energies within the world, seeking perhaps a space for the heart to speak and the celestial waters to be swallowed for all of us. So this could be a time where it might give us even more hope, even beyond Jupiter being in Aquarius and Saturn in Aquarius as well. So this is all part of that dynamic transition from the intensity of the year 2020 and the Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter alignment that was taking place to something more lighter, more hopeful, more heart-centered, instead of just a process of decomposition and death and rebirth taking place, and really intense experience, especially around the structure of humanity. Okay, so here are the main dates of all the different things that for Jupiter and Pisces. So Jupiter spends May 13th to July 28th in 2021, and then it moves back into Pisces December 28th, 2021 through May 10th of 2022. And then it moves into Aries and then comes back into Pisces for a couple of months between October 27th and December 20th, 2022. So it splits its time fairly evenly, more evenly than it did in 2021 with another sign, in this case Aries in 2022. There is a Neptune conjunction taking place in 2022 with Jupiter, and this is they'll be within 1 degree between April 7th and 17th of 2022. So certainly this is going to lead to another video with talking about the Jupiter Neptune conjunction in that zone. I would also suggest using Richard Tarnas's work and in his analysis of in Cosmos and Psyche. When two other planets come together, either in conjunction, square, opposition, he sometimes uses a 10-degree or a 15-degree orb. You can use these larger orbs to help you understand the nature of these transits. But this is the more, the most, concentrated part is that 10 to 11-day period where Jupiter and Neptune are in conjunction in April of 2022. Then we have Jupiter-Mercury conjunction on March 20 of 2022, Jupiter-Venus on April 30th, and Jupiter-Mars in May 20, 2022. You can see between March and May of 2022, that's when a lot of that activity is taking place. There'll be, of course, Jupiter-Sun conjunction in probably March as well. I don't have it listed here, but that'll be that time period in 2022. Okay, so here is the main dates, and you can see this 12-year period where it comes back around into the other side, into Pisces. In the 20th century and 21st century. But it also Jupiter has this way of repeating a particular pattern, like all other planets, essentially, called synodic cycle. And a synodic meaning the same position or relationship to the moon, to the sun, when it's, either an aspect in some fashion, primarily conjunctions. So in this case, with the sun and the sign and how it returns back, this time period of 2021 to 2022 takes us all the way back 83 years. This is the synodic cycle of Jupiter. It takes us back 83 years to 1938, 1939, when it split time with Aquarius and Aries. And then bordering that, it splits time either with Aries or Aquarius. And in fact, I think that 2033 period to 2034 period, that's an error. That should be Aquarius up here Aquarius down here instead of just Aries here in 2010 and 2011. I'll have to may do a reframe of that at some point and looking at that. But most years it spends without going into other signs. Now, Jupiter also does this with all other signs, and it rotates this over very long periods of time, that 83-year period over centuries, and it'll rotate through that zone. So this is just an example of how frequently Jupiter moves into Pisces. Okay, so what are those other time periods? Every 83 years, Jupiter will repeat a pattern in what is called a synodic return of the planet, very close to or exact on the date, meaning the solar calendar in relation to the sun or solar return, that it was prior to when it splits, when it splits. So in this 2021 and 2022, Aquarius and Aries. Aquarius 2021 and Aries 2022. So here are the 4 time periods where I've outlined here where Jupiter has the same pattern. and when you look at the actual dates, they're usually almost exactly on the same date, usually within a day or so of the time period before. So well, this is one thing to note too, is that Uranus, the planet Uranus, completes its orbit around the sun every 84 years. So primarily, Uranus will be in the same sign every time Jupiter has a synodic return of something. So Uranus is currently in the sign of Taurus, and in 1938 to 39, Uranus was also in Taurus. Again, in 1855 to 1856, both Uranus and Pluto, interestingly enough, were in Taurus, and Neptune was in Pisces. And then we bring up to the Neptune factor is Neptune takes 165 years. That's twice, just about twice as long as Uranus, maybe a little under twice as long. So every 2 Jupiter synodic cycles, we get one full revolution of Neptune. And so Neptune will be in the same sign. And so this is, I would say, 2021 to 2022 has a little more in common with 1855 to 1856, except that Pluto is in Taurus rather than Capricorn. Although if we go back to 1772 to 1773, a few years before the American Revolution, we can see Pluto was in Capricorn, Uranus in Taurus, but Neptune was on the opposite side, Virgo, on the polarity of Virgo. So we could see with each of these cases that these were the years preceding, a huge explosion of intense events, war, ideological battles, political strife, and in the case of 1938 to 39, waves and waves of nationalism, the beginnings of World War II. So we can see that there's a role that Jupiter is playing here and all of that. Now, I will also subscribe that Jupiter's entry into Aquarius this year as well plays a very significant role, and the prior years. So it wasn't just because Jupiter was in Pisces. It had a lot to do with also Jupiter in Aquarius. But I just find it interesting in that pattern, the overall pattern, that we could even call this, in a longer video, Jupiter in Pisces / Aquarius / Aries, bringing that energy up, within a 2 to 3 year transit here. So this is just giving you some additional insights into what this represents. Okay, so this was just meant to be a shorter video just about Jupiter and Pisces and what to connect with. Again, this is it's much more heart-centered transit, and I think that there's an intent for a greater feeling function to come through in a way that is less biased or less reactive, more appreciative or of wanting to be of service in the world to especially on a spiritual level, but also for purposes of healing our brothers and sisters and all that is in between. So we can connect onto that level with this Jupiter and Pisces transit and open up our hearts more in this space, and maybe find room for that instead of pointing fingers or creating violent reactions or restrictions or things that push people further down to the edge. So this is Jupiter Pisces is more of an openness, more of a connection to a place where we can imagine a more beautiful and idealistic future, but necessarily doesn't need to be stuck on that, but something that could actually be maybe in the future to apply in a practical way down the road. So thank you very much, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and feel free to make comments there as well. I'm always happy to see any thoughts or ideas on the comment line. So I want to thank you all, and I wish you the best and dream well, everyone.